Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Couples Academy show. My name is Hassani. Good to see you all. I'm excited to continue in our conversation. We've been talking about rebuilding intimacy, and we've laid a foundation for you over the last few episodes. And today we're going to dive into how to restore intellectual intimacy. This is critically important, because oftentimes when you first form a relationship, one of the things that you do is you connect and you bond by communicating. And oftentimes in your search to discover who that person is, you're communicating about a number of different things, a variety of different topics, to see if you have shared interests and shared passions and what each other's perspective is on things. But shortly after you establish a commitment, this significantly diminishes, because the attitude is, well, I already know what they think, I already know what they believe, and so what else is there to talk about? And so this is one of the areas that people significantly struggle with, and we've heard this time and time again. We just don't talk about anything. We have nothing to talk about. He has nothing to say. She shares nothing. And so there's a breach, there's a break, there's a shutdown in this particular area. This was one of the things that formed the connection initially. And as we always say, however you initiated that relationship is what you want to continue to do to maintain that relationship. So intellectual intimacy is critically important. And so listen, before we dive in, really quickly, just want to give you a couple announcements. It is the summertime, and because it is the summer, we have some last chance weekends coming up, June 7th through the 9th, July 12th through the 14th, and August the 9th through 11th. So make sure you go ahead and register for that. But let's dive into today's conversation. We're talking about how to restore it. There's a number of different things that I want to go to give you some context. So number one, ways to restore intellectual intimacy. Now, obviously, we're talking about after an affair, after there's been a betrayal. However, you're not limited to just that. If you haven't been through any type of crisis like that, but you've lost this connection, this is a way that you can begin to gain it back. So number one, engage in meaningful conversations. I can't express how important this is. Most couples, unfortunately, engage in what we call cliche conversations, where it's small talk, it's back and forth banter. It really doesn't have any substance. There's no significance. All you're doing is talking about the basics, like, hey, what's for dinner? Hey, did you pay that such and such bill? Did you pick up the kids from school today? Listen, Tommy has a trip. Susie has an outing. Like it has absolutely nothing to do with the two of you, but things that do with everything that you both are connected to. And so what happens over the course of time, if I'm not connecting with you, but there's a need and a desire for me to connect, I'm going to connect with someone else. And so that's why, of course, no one person can meet all of your needs. And that's why it's important to have a healthy community of people so that you can have certain needs met. Like, for instance, in terms of conversation, I have a good outlet. I have friends that I can talk to. I have family members that I can engage in. And those are what we would call healthy relationships, and having appropriate boundaries even within those. But when we don't seek out these healthy outlets, we begin to delve into unhealthier outlets potentially. Oftentimes we talk about how you're spending most of your day, your working hours on a job with colleagues and coworkers and clients, and you're communicating and you're developing what? You're developing relationships. You're tapping into a level of intimacy. And intimacy simply means into me see. And a lot of these colleagues and a lot of these associates wind up becoming your friends because you have shared interests and shared desires and shared passions. And what we're saying is that these relationships may not be a problem, but they should not replace, they should not compromise the primary relationship you have with your spouse. And so meaningful conversation is having discussions on things that you both have an interest in. Oftentimes in a relationship, you realize we're just two different people. We like two different things. And one of the things that you have to form is rituals in your relationship. Rituals are things that you both engage in based upon a shared interest, a shared like. So let's start there. What are the things that you both share? What are the activities that you both engage in together? What are the beliefs that you both share together as a couple? What are the interests of topics of conversation that you both can share with each other? And so whether we're talking about current events, because there's a lot taking place in the world, and when one is aware and another isn't, it's an opportunity to invite them into a conversation. But when we take the approach that says, well, that's your thing, I'm not into that, automatically we've created a breach, a breakdown. And so the reality is, if your spouse is passionate about something, you should develop a passion for it too. Because oftentimes you can love your spouse through that passion. So if my spouse is passionate about watching documentaries, as an example, may not be my thing, but every now and then I'll sit down with you and I'll watch one with you. Why? Because I want to spend time with you. And if spending time with you means that we're watching this documentary together, so be it. I may learn something. I may actually gain some interest in it, right? So there's benefit to that. But then it's also open to having the conversation about the documentary that you just saw and expressing a genuine interest in it. There's nothing worse than your spouse is excited to talk to you about something and you're just like, yep. You're in your phone, yeah, what, yeah. True, right? So you're giving no eye contact. There's no active or responsive listening. There are no follow-up questions. You're not engaged with your spouse. And so your spouse feels like, what's the point? Like, I'd rather talk to someone who's genuinely interested in the things that I'm interested in. So whatever those personal passions may be, find out how you can become more passionate about your spouse, or about that passion with your spouse, or about your spouse with that passion. Either way, it's attention given, it's time spent, it builds a bond and a connection that maybe you haven't had before. What about interest in films? Like, we talked about documentaries, but what about films or TV shows? Maybe you're not into the type of genre of entertainment your spouse is in, but taking the time to engage in it allows you to begin to have meaningful conversation around those things. And it's all a give and take in a relationship, because if you can spend time with your spouse and give them time, energy, and effort and attention in those spaces, then they should be able to do the same for you. It's called the law of reciprocity, right? Reaping and sowing. And when you sow into your marriage, sow into your relationship, you will reap something from it. So meaningful conversation is about sharing new information. Danielle is a nerd, right? I'm a nerd that way. Like, we love learning. We love watching videos. We love educating ourselves about things. And so we'll take the time to say, hey, did you see this video? Oh my God. So we'll text each other, share each videos with each other, and then we'll have a conversation about it. Or if it's a long length conversation based upon a long video, well, that's a part of our daily debrief, right? It's important to be connecting and communicating throughout the course of the day, but if you can't do that, at least at the end of the day, and that way that brings about some sense of, oneness, because you're looking forward to talking to your friend. You're looking forward to communicating thoughts and ideas and perspectives with your friend. What do you think? Are we on the same page? Do we think differently? Maybe there's a perspective that you have that I don't have, and it will help us as we engage. And so it becomes fresh and stimulating to the relationship and puts a spark back into the relationship that may not have been there. So the purpose of meaningful conversations is so critically important to the intellectual development of that relationship, and it will bring about a level of intimacy. Let's go to the next. The next one is pursued shared learning. This is huge. We have this term called drinking from the same well together. And when you're taking classes together, going to workshops and seminars together, you're gaining insight together, building interest together, growing and developing together, which builds bonds and connections. This can be anything from taking a cooking class, right? An experiential type learning class. And how fun is that to incorporate that into the marriage? All the way to, going on a seminar, learning something for your business, but you're doing it together. And so that level of learning legitimately enhances that bond, that tie and connection, because now you begin to see even more purpose in your partnership. You know, we talk about the blessings of a relationship and the benefits that come along with it, but then there's the purpose for our union and what we're able to do together as two individual brilliant people. And as we pursue education, it further cements our commitment and our purpose of being together in this thing called a marriage. And so going to lectures and seminars and intellectual events and even services, right, church services, and you're learning these things together, it expands your knowledge and it increases the connection that you have with your spouse. I mean, these are practical things here. Like, there's nothing rocket science about any of these things. The next one, read and discuss, right? So we talked about this before. There are books that I read that Danielle doesn't, and vice versa. So we may read and then share with each other the perspective that we've read. Now, we may read similar books that complement each other, but oftentimes things are written in a very unique way, in a very unique style, and different points and different statistics and stories and narratives may come out in that reading. And the more you do it, once again, you're developing a shared belief, a shared philosophy, a shared knowledge base that bridges you two together, right? And so whether it's articles or essays or blogs or audiobooks, take the time to be intentional to learn with your spouse. Now, this is something that a lot of couples just don't do. Right? I'm talking about it because it's so natural to us, because we have an interest for it and because of what we do. But if this is not your thing, it may be something good to develop in your relationship. It may sound like a foreign concept, like, why would I do that? Like, I'm on my own journey, he or she's on their journey, and that's just what it is. And maybe that's a part of the problem. See, there's nothing wrong with being on your individual journeys, but there should be something that you do collectively as a couple that's uniquely new and different that enhances things. And if picking up a book and reading or watching a documentary can help begin to do that, then you should go ahead and do that. You know why? One of the reasons that you should do that. Oh, actually, let's go to this next one. Collaborate on projects. This is another one, right? We're going to get into some details about this, but let's first go to a quick commercial break. Stay right there. I hope you're getting something from this conversation. We'll be back right after this break. All right, guys, we're back. We were watching the Couples Academy show. We're talking about how to restore intellectual intimacy. And oftentimes for many people, their focus is on physical or sexual intimacy. Now, let me tell you, that is our final step. Now, interestingly enough, most people, when they get into a relationship, there is a strong physical attraction and emotional desirability. And most people initiate their relationships with the physical, with the sexual. Prematurely, may I add. And then after we've connected in that way, then we can be emotional, and then we can start talking intellectually, and then we can, I guess, eventually become spiritually connected. And that's the journey. And I would say that you went in the wrong order. But to restore your intimacy back into your marriage, you have to go in the correct order. You go from spiritual to intellectual to emotional to physical, or some slight variation of it, but the physical piece is the last piece. Because oftentimes, when most couples are physically disconnected, it's not because there's something physically wrong, though that does happen. It may not necessarily be because we just don't have good sex. That may not be the issue, but usually there's a relational issue, there's an emotional issue, there's some type of breakdown or shutdown in the relationship, and the way you get back to the physical sexual connection is through the spiritual, intellectual, and emotional. So this really does help to lay the foundation, because if intimacy, in another word for that, be closeness, the more close I am to you, then the more safe I feel with you, then the more willing I am to become vulnerable with you and begin to share not only my heart and my mind, but my body with you. So the way, in order as men, for instance, to penetrate your wife is to first penetrate her heart. You want to penetrate her body, but you must first penetrate her heart. And when you do so in that way, it will help. Now, guys, I know that there's a delay. Why, I don't know. So hopefully you can work with me as I'm getting through this. But we're talking about the different ways that you can develop intellectual intimacy. So let's go to the next. Collaborating on projects. Okay? So think about this. When you go to your job and you're working in a department, maybe with a team, there is a shared project that you all are working on together. Now, whether they may be a daily task, maybe it's a small project that should last about a week or two, or maybe it's an ongoing project that's going to take several months to a year in order to truly successfully accomplish. There's the coming together, there's the bonding, there's the collaboration, there's a cohesiveness amongst you and other team members where you're working together, you're accommodating each other's personalities, you're tapping into each other's strengths. And when you accomplish these projects or these tasks, it forms a bond, a connection, a friendship, a relationship with those individuals. Think about those who are in the military. When you're serving in the military and you're training or on the battlefield, you are relying upon your other members of that squad, because collectively you work as a team to get things done. Okay, one of my favorite movies is Ocean's 11. If you remember that movie, then they had an Ocean's 12 and an Ocean's 13. But here you had a group of people with expertise in different areas that had to rely upon each other. So they didn't operate independent of each other. There was an interdependence that they had with each other. And we talk about the interdependence that you must have in your relationship, because you are partners together in this thing called life. And so when you as a couple begin to collaborate on things, it binds you together. It cements further the relationship. It allows for a deeper level of commitment and trust, because if I'm depending upon your skill set, your intellect, your contribution, in order to get this thing done, I can't just rely upon myself. So there's got to be a level of trust there. So when you come together with your spouse, working on new projects, now from an intellectual capacity, we can talk about anything like, Danielle and I have written a book together. right? So maybe there's a project like that. There's a book you want to write together. There's some great endeavor that requires both of your intellectual capacity. Maybe one of you has a career and you're always leaning upon your spouse to give you insight and perspective and to, maybe you're a student in school, right? And you need your spouse to help you to study and to get you through certain classes, and their involvement in your life is a contributing factor. So when I graduated and I crossed the stage and now I have my graduation ceremony, one of the first people that I thank is my spouse for always being there, for always helping me. See, this level of collaboration and cohesiveness and working on a project together is critically important, and then contributes to the overall intellectual intimacy that a couple can develop. Let's go to the next. Exploring new interests. Now, usually when we talk about exploring new interests, we talk about it from a very recreational way, right? Like forming new hobbies and engaging in new activities and all of these things. But from an intellectual perspective, one thing that could be fun, and this is one of the things that we started as a family, we said, you know what, let's learn a second language, right? So we set up an account, a Duolingo account for the family. We all committed to learning Spanish, right? We've taken lessons, we've used the app. There's certain days that we try to talk to each other only in Spanish. Now, listen, some are more committed than others. We have certain family members that are just making quantum leaps and bounds, and some of us are still on the struggle bus. But yet and still, it's something that we decided to do as a family, and it brings about a team aspect. It brings about a sense of togetherness, because we're in this thing together, and nobody really wants to be the weakest link, and everybody's contributing to this effort. And so developing new hobbies and interests and new projects and new pursuits really is an amazing thing. Another thing that, obviously we've talked about in the past, but it's a great way to build intellectual intimacy, is to travel and explore new places. A lot of times when we travel, we focus on the food. What's the food like? Like, I can't wait to eat the food. The food must be amazing. But then there are other things that you can experience in your travels. It's the architecture. It's really embracing the culture. It's discovering more about the people. And so now with these new experiences and these new insights that you're sharing with your spouse, yes, you're collecting and forming memories, but it's also helping to influence who you are constantly becoming. We say this all the time, that you pick up belief systems and attitudes and philosophies along the way through life based upon your experiences. And so because we have been able and afforded to travel around the world and experience other cultures, it has made us more sophisticated as people, more cultured, a better perspective that we both share because of us engaging in it. And then the last thing I would say, and I hope this is helping somebody, the importance of setting intellectual goals as a couple. Now, interestingly enough, when we think about anything intellectual or educational, we're thinking in the context of school and what is the goal and what do I need to accomplish in order to pass a test and get a grade and graduate. But establishing intellectual goals in your relationship are critically important as a couple as well. And so there's a few things that you could do. What if you just, listen, it's summertime, my kids are going to school, and in the local library, they have these challenges every summer. For who can read 50 books in a summer. That's a pretty aggressive goal. But it's something that oftentimes students in the neighborhood pursue. And what's the purpose of it? So that your mind continues to work throughout the summertime. Yes, you're on a break, but you don't want your, as they say, if you lose it, if you don't use it, you will lose it. So likewise in a relationship, what intellectual goal can you establish? So there's a couple things you can do. Number one, we talk about workday, play day, right? The importance of that. Well, you can have these weekly intellectual dates with your spouse. Maybe, for a date night, we're going to go to a museum, or maybe we watch a documentary, or maybe we attend a lecture in the local area. We look for something that's really interesting, or maybe we read a book together, something that will stimulate our minds that we can engage in. That's a new norm that we're going to incorporate into our relationship. And then you have intellectual check-ins. You know how you check in with your, hey, how's your day? What's going on? Just, checking in. Let me know what's going on. Well, intellectual check-ins are, hey, have you read anything recently? Hey, you watch any cool videos? Anything you want to share? And that's a cool thing because of social media. Depending upon the feed that you have, depending upon what you search for, all types of amazing, interesting videos can pop up. And the ability to now watch these, learn from these, and share them with your spouse is awesome. Another thing you can do to really enhance the intellectual stimulation of your relationship is share your journaling. You know, a lot of times you're reading and you're journaling where you're reflecting upon your thoughts of the book and what impact that it's had on you. And so being able to share with your spouse your journal and ideas and quotes and thoughts and things that you've been, kind of rolling over in your mind, it really invites them into your world. We talk about how we live 3 lives: a public life, a private life, and a secret life. And the secret life is the secret thought life. What's going on in my mind? What's going on in my heart? And the one thing that really is physical evidence of your secret thought life is your journal. And maybe some things are for you, and that's fine. But there's some things that you can absolutely share with your spouse, okay? As a couple, intellectually, if you want to create intellectual stimulation, consider joining a group. There's all types of groups you can join. There's a book club that you can join. Maybe there's a discussion group that you both can be a part of. Maybe there's a community of individuals where people operate in a very high intellectual way, and being a part of that community will strengthen and enhance your intellect that you can also benefit from within the confines of your relationship. So joining a group. And then finally, how about an online course, something that you two can take together? That's always fun because it keeps you connected. It keeps you engaging in what we would call a daily or a weekly ritual that you two have to come together. You're learning together, and it enhances things. So guys, we're talking about closeness. We're talking about intimacy. If you've experienced an affair, one of the things you absolutely can do, making this very practical, is reading a book that talks about infidelity. Usually the betrayed spouse is a lot more educated and knows a lot more about the affair than even the person who was involved in it, because the person who was involved in it, they just want to push past it. They don't want to deal with it. They just want to move on. How long are we going to talk about this? But sometimes your ability to help your spouse heal, your ability to overcome your own weaknesses, faults, flaws, and temptations that got you into this in the first place, your ability to restore your relationship is in your ability to become a student of what you found yourself thrusted into, this affair. And so there are many books and resources out there that you can read. And by you reading it, it really shows your spouse that you care, that you're concerned about the advancement of your relationship, and you're willing to do all the things that are necessary to bring about that healing and restoration. So guys, I hope that this was helpful today and gave you some insight. It was pretty meaty. We talked about intellectual intimacy. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about emotional intimacy and how we begin to move into those things. So thank you for watching. Love you all, and we will see you tomorrow.